Welcome to another episode of the Speak Up Africa podcast. My name is Wangeshi Karemi,
Mine is Anyona Bulungu.
and today we are talking about youth activism. Okay, so make a point to follow us on all our social media platforms as Speak Up Africa, Africa with a K.
K is always constant.
I am always waiting for Anyona to say that in every one of our introductions. K is always constant. So today
Yeah.
we're talking about youth activism.
Mhm.
Gen Z. So we live in a Gen Z generation.
Mhm.
Is a statement like that.
Yeah.
And the one attribute of Gen Z is that they're always fighting for a voice.
Okay.
Not really, but
Mm.
kind of. They're
We hear you.
outspoken. They're
No, I
actually
think-
more
I think-
outspoken
no,
than other
generally,
generations.
I think millennials as well.
Well, the millennials
Younger
are coming to be
millennials.
Gen Z. You know, those ones are coming to be Gen Z. The millennials, those ones for the ground, the startup millennials are not that vocal. But the ones
Younger
that are
millennials.
coming up, the ones that actually saw to the start of the Gen Z, they're vocal. They're vocal.
Mhm.
But one thing we can agree is that Gen Z is vocal. And that
Yeah.
every other day there's someone that is fighting for something on social media, on the streets. They are fighting for their voice to be heard.
Okay.
And so today we want to discuss you who fights for something you believe in. Today we want to discuss everyone that fights for a cause, an activist of any kind and every kind. We want to talk about youth activism in Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania.
Mhm.
We start.
Mhm.
A simple definition of who is a youth activist in your own, in your own terms and for the basis of this conversation.
Yeah, it's just people who basically fight for social change.
Social change,
Yeah.
particularly.
Okay, because we're talking about youth activism, the youth who are fighting for social change. Yep.
So youth is between what
Layman.
age to what age?
Standard 18 to 35.
Standard 18 to 35.
Yeah.
All right, so let's give a few questions. People who are fighting for a religious cause, are they activists?
Yeah, depends on in what sense. Like a religious cause, for example.
I am fighting for people to become Christians. Am I an activist?
Well,
On the
I
basis
don't
of this
know.
conversation.
No, I don't think that's what activism would be. Yeah.
So, in all essence, a social change is limited to some things.
Not
How about you
really.
give us an example of what you would consider a youth activist?
What I would consider.
Like what would someone do? And then this one would be yes, youth activist. What would they be fighting for? Maybe an example of
Maybe
youth
like people's
activist.
rights, like basic human rights.
Like if during the time when Uganda had their elections, there was a lot of human rights issues,
Yeah.
including the cutting down of the internet and the
Yeah.
things like that. So people who would go against
Imagine
that,
not having internet just because you're having elections.
oops. No, but people who are fighting against that becomes automatically a youth activist.
I think, yeah, not I think, like I'm sure that I would consider them youth activists. You're fighting for what should be the people's rights.
Okay. A controversial topic. People
Yeah.
who fight for the LGBTQ,
Yeah.
A plus and all the other
Yeah.
letters. Okay, youth activists.
Hmm.
People who fight for environmental justice.
Yeah.
People who fight for another social change.
My dress, my choice.
Definitely
Dressing,
people
yeah.
who do that. Yeah. So
Yeah.
people who fight against these rules, gender equality.
There's a
that
story I
rules
wanted
and
to
things
share,
like
but I
that.
think it's not in my
Please
place to
share.
share. No, I think it happened to someone I know, and it's about dressing. I don't think it's in my place to share, but
But now we are
it's more
curious.
serious than you guys would think.
Okay.
The dressing issue.
But my dress, my choice person becomes an activist.
Mhm.
Yeah. So when we talk about youth activism, we're basically talking about everybody who fights for a cause.
Yeah.
If you ask me, even those ones that fight for a religious cause are still activists because you
You
sit
know,
down
a
and you have
religious cause
something
in
and
the
you
same in the
believe.
sense that you see the way we say there are some harmful traditional practices. I don't want to get into that area of discussion, but I genuinely think there are some harmful religious practices.
Okay.
Yeah.
But here's my thought.
I'm not going to get into that, but that's something. So if you are fighting to change that because it's harmful or it's really not a good practice for humanity, for human beings, then that way I'd consider. But if you're fighting for you're convinced, that is not fighting for people to become Christians.
Yeah.
That's convincing people to you want them to make a
I
choice.
feel
You want them to make a choice. Like it's nothing that has deprived them of any right. Like it's just a choice they've decided. I don't want to be a Christian. I don't want to be religious
No,
in
but
whatever sense.
I'd argue like this. I'd argue like this. That if you're fighting for anything, you're an activist. It doesn't matter whether I agree with you or I disagree
Mm.
with you.
No, but what I'm saying is you're not fighting for anything.
You
Co-
if you're fighting for
you
people to
want to
become Christians,
that's not fighting
despite the
for.
fact that Christianity has some things that you as a Nyonya wouldn't agree with, if you're fighting for people
I'm
to
a Christian.
become
What you mean?
Muslims, if you're fighting for people to become Buddhist,
Mm.
whatever you're fighting for, you're an activist by the
But what I'm
virtue
saying
that you're fighting
is,
for that thing.
but what I'm saying is that's not fighting for. That
It's,
you're convinced. It's like me convincing you to become a teacher.
but
I'm
you see,
convincing you
activism
to
is
become a
that.
teacher. I'm not fighting for you to become a
Activism is
teacher.
fighting for. Like, let me give you
Yeah,
an
but
example.
what I'm
You
saying
know, like
is
Christianity.
that's not fighting for. You convincing someone you should be a Christian is not fighting for them to be a Christian.
Mhm.
That's what I'm saying. It's not fighting for. It's the same way I can go and I can tell you that hey, you're an environmentalist, but I think you should become a doctor. I'm not fighting for you to become a doctor.
You're
I'm trying to make
suggesting,
you.
you're trying to
That's what.
convince
Yeah,
me.
it's not fighting for anything.
No, but there are people who fight for Christianity, who
No,
fight for
you
the
see,
virtues,
if you're
those
being
old virtues
oppressed,
that.
for example, and this is probably out of this region, but for example, when Adidas and Addison Rae had that campaign, that bikini campaign that had some aspects that were really offensive to Christianity as a religion, and more particularly to Catholicism, then that was a fight for Christianity, and that can also happen to other religions. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about.
No.
Okay,
No, but,
basically, I don't know if this is very advanced, but there was they rolled out what is the name? A new collection of bikinis, and so it read Father, Son, Holy Spirit.
Oh, there.
Yeah. So you see, that's like a fight against religion. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's different. But then you trying to convince someone to become a Christian, it's not a fight. And now we discussed a lot about that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's say that once you're fighting for something, you automatically become an activist. And we can also agree that sometimes we do not agree with the activist because you're on one side or you're on the other side.
Okay.
But the basis of this conversation today is to try and understand what are some of the battles that the youth activists in Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania are facing, and how do we circumvent around it? What do we do? What is the way forward from that? So I am going to start by letting you tell us what are some of the challenges that you think activists face in these three countries.
Government repression.
Eh.
Government repression. Everybody knows about Boniface Mwangi's story. Everybody knows about what is Chagulanyi. Bobby Wine. I was trying to remember his first name.
I didn't
But
even know that
Bobby
was
Wine,
his
he's
first
called
name.
hey, the spelling is different, the pronunciation is different. It's challenging to me, but I hope I'm not offending anybody. We all know. I don't know if you know about Stella Nyanzi. Do you know her, the Ugandan? There's a time she wanted to vie for a certain position. Yeah. So all these people face a lot of government repression. Like you speak about something, you're arrested. Speak about something you shouldn't be speaking. Like the government oppresses youth activists so much because I feel like every single time they're fighting for something, usually it's something that has either been caused by the government or enabled by the government. So then
Yeah.
they feel like they are under attack, even though we're fighting for basic human rights.
Yeah. So the government feels like they're under attack, so they take some action.
Yeah.
And most often than not, that action is not good.
It's not even just arresting; it's torturing people.
It's torture. It's even out there, like just calling out someone for doing something they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah. Also, while it's true that sometimes there are youth activists who've not been repressed by the government, especially those fighting for things like climate action, climate change, and all of that. Not climate change, climate action. Yeah. Most of them haven't faced repression. There was even this lady. Okay, I can't remember her name. But she was able to to be she was part of COP 26?
Both 26 and 27.
Yeah, she was able to represent, Kenyans together with other East Africans, and they take our voices out there. When it comes to climate change, climate action and all of that, and you find like activists in particular sectors like climate action. Those ones don't easily face government repression because everybody is agreeing to the fact that we're suffering.
I feel
and
like
this
they
is being
do.
caused by some actions by some human beings.
I feel like they do.
But
I feel like they
you
do.
think they do?
I
Or you
think
feel
they
like
do because you see, climate action is as sensitive
I
as
don't.
the next thing.
Yeah.
The idea is if the government says they'll do something and then you call them out, you will face the repression. Yeah. I think the reason you think they don't is because most of the time the government agrees. but they actually don't do it. The policies are there,
Mhm.
but there's not. Let's give an example.
Yeah.
When it comes to climate action, we have like the polluter pays principle. Just let's
Mhm.
just use that one.
Mhm.
The polluter pays principle. It is there. While it is not necessarily being activated, well, it's not necessarily being put into action. It is there. So if you're going to fight the government, they're going to tell you, we already did this. You see.
Mm.
But when it comes to other sectors like the
That is that down that
LGBTQIA and
if you pollute the environment, you have to
you are
pay.
you're the one that pays, yes. As simple as that.
Mm.
And then now when you compare them to people like the LGBTQIA, the
Mm.
policies that are there already have already messed it up. Okay. So the government is like
What do you mean? Are there any policies to help the
yeah,
community?
the constitution where
The constitution does not favor.
it does exactly. That's the point.
Yeah.
The difference between the climate action person and the one who's
All the
fighting
three
for
constitutions, by
yes,
the
is
way.
that this one already has policies that are set up that will favor them. Yeah,
For
whether
for
they are
example,
happening or
for
not.
climate action.
Yes, for
Okay.
climate action. Now the polluter pays it.
Mm.
It's already there. So even when you attack the government, they tell you we already set up the policies. We already set
Yeah.
up the legislations.
Mm.
Now this other group that is fighting for like the LGBTQIA, I do not know all those letters. Forgive me, I don't know the letters, and so I am not trying to. Everyone is included into that group.
Mm.
So these people fighting when they go to the government is already negative towards you. So you're starting from a different point of view. I think that is why you think that some groups do not face, repressions and others do. Because if you're fighting for something that is already the constitution says no to, it becomes difficult.
No, but you see, for example, there's things that we clearly know. Like, if, for example, you find that it's the constitutions provide for no discrimination of any sort, like
Yeah.
gender or race or whatever. But you see, we're always constantly trying to encourage in women empowerment and such kinds of things because we already feel like the woman is not at par with the man in society. And that even aside, when it comes to something like dressing, surely there's places where you will be discriminated because of how you dressed. Yes, and it's clear, it's there.
It's that.
To get to a point where what's her name, Migwe, Migwe. Okay, I tend to butcher people's names. I am apologizing at this point. Apologizing at this point. But this is the thing. When she gets to a point where we have to have an entire campaign on social media physically to fight for something as simple as people's dressing choice. Like, who are we? What are we turning into? And this is something that is clearly why would you go and attack somebody because of how they're dressed? They spent their money on it. It's their clothes. It's their body. I really don't get it.
It's the entitlement of society. People feeling like because we are a society, we're entitled to judge and decide how you behave. And we appraise some behaviors and we put down others. So if you behave in a certain way, we as a society feel like it is our responsibility to put you back in line. And I think that's the biggest problem. People feeling like they're entitled to your shit.
Do you
are
feel
not
like-
entitled to anybody's things. Let people behave. I say this is let people behave in the best way that they are going to behave, so long as it doesn't harm you. That is the only thing. So long as it doesn't harm you, let people behave in the way that they ought to be. I think for me, one of the biggest problems with activists has got to be disunity. Okay. The anticipation that because one person is an activist and they're fighting for something, that they are also supposed to support your cause of some sort, yeah? And the fact that they don't support your cause and they have the kind of influence, you see, by the time you become a known youth activist, you have the resources and the influence, yeah? Whether it is on social media
not always. Okay, you have resources on social media, maybe in terms of numbers, you have a following, so it's definitely easier for you to get, to reach out to a wider audience.
Yeah.
But doesn't always mean facilitation of other means, especially financially, is what can become a challenge.
Yeah,
a
it's
huge
actually a
challenge,
challenge.
because it's not easy. It's not easy to even in fact, to hold a protest is not easy.
It's not. It is not. It is not easy.
Peaceful protest. We advocate for peace. We're talking about just like marching in the streets with placards and fighting for your rights without causing any harm
Even
to
a
people's
Twitter strike
property
is
or
not even
people.
cheap.
Yeah.
Organizing a Twitter strike, getting numbers on Twitter and getting people to actually sit down and actually strike with you for that 1 hour, 2 hours, it's not easy. And most often than not, it is not cheap.
Mm.
Activists have to like resources is a challenge.
Mm.
But we are saying for you to become a renowned youth activist, because everybody is an activist in their own way. I feel like there are
Mm.
things you fight for, and
Mm.
you're not as an individual, whether it's women rights or things like that. There are things you fight for,
Yeah.
and you constantly fight for them within your spaces, your online spaces. You fight for them within your circle of friends and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But now, for you to become a renowned youth activist, that you are renowned as a youth activist, for you to get the
Yeah.
kind of influence that is
Mm-hmm.
necessary to make the change that we need,
Mm.
you have to have resources. We can
Yeah.
agree on that.
Yeah.
So now the problem is when you have resources and you have numbers and you're fighting for, let's say, environmental justice, and on the other side you are against LGBTQIA, it
Mm.
looks like you're not fighting for a cause. Because it looks like there's this battle. This is my
No,
view,
wait. Say that
though.
again.
Okay, let me just give you an example, right?
Mm.
You're fighting for you're fighting for environmental, let's just go back with the environmental justice. You're
Mm.
fighting for environmental justice. That is your niche. You're fighting for environmental justice, but you
Or
have
maybe corruption.
indifferent views towards some other cause,
Mm-hmm.
like for instance the LGBTQIA. So as an individual, you are for environmental justice, but you're not necessarily for LGBTQIA, because you can be for and against, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so that means you don't necessarily fight for that cause.
Mm-hmm.
You find a lot of people calling out activists for things like that. You find an environmental activist being told, "Oh, we had people being done for this," and you said
Oh yeah, and you
nothing.
say, oh yeah,
You
yeah,
said
yeah,
nothing,
yeah, yeah.
and you forget that you have your niche. I feel like you
And it's
have
not
your
even about
niche.
niche. Sometimes it's about, we understand different issues differently. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm not particularly taking your example, but say I am anti-corruption,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm an activist who's constantly out there talking about anti-corruption, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then there on the other side there's maybe something like artist rights.
Mm-hmm.
They have been denied their rights in one way or another, and the artists are therefore fighting for their rights. And I have no information and no idea about how that's happening, or what led to ABCD. And I'm not saying that the victim is always in the wrong. I'm not victim blaming or pointing fingers, but you find that I have no information about that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to pick a side, and I really don't have the information as a person. Not even because I'm always fighting. Say I can always be fighting for corruption, but then I there's a different issue like child molestation,
Yeah.
and I also take a stand on that. And that's because I am aware, or yeah, have the information. I'm speaking from a
Enough.
point of knowledge.
Yeah.
But then there's something else that is usually particular to a certain demographic of people, and
Yeah.
then you don't have
Information.
access to the information
You
as
don't even
such.
have a
You don't know
particular
what got
interest
them to
towards
this
it.
point. So then that is an entire different dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
And or even maybe I've been going through my own stuff, and I've not been online for the past 2 days, or I've been going there for just something small and I leave. So I haven't interacted with that. And then you're calling me out. You see, that's
Yeah, and it really puts down on our activists when you call them out for not taking a stand on things that they don't have, choose
no,
your
no,
words,
but
information.
on the other hand, though, I understand why people tend to do that, because you have a following. You're at a place of
You see
influence.
now you
When
put
you say that, I'm not saying you have to, but I understand why sometimes it's a little frustrating for the people who don't have numbers, because you are at a place of influence by the virtue that you have a bigger following on social media.
Mhm.
So then they know if you were to speak about it, it can get to relevant people ASAP.
Yeah, of course there's that. But then there's the question of if it does not affect me as much as it affects you, that's the number one. Then there's a question of knowledge. Like you said, it's
Justice will
knowledge.
never be served if the unaffected do not are not pained as much as, or are not pained at all like the affected ones.
No, you become the voice to the voiceless, but you cannot become the voice to the voiceless in everything.
I agree, but I'm just saying
And
sometimes. But
some
I was
things.
talking about the statement that you said,
Mhm.
that it does not affect me. You
But
see,
sometimes it
something.
actually doesn't affect you, to be
So that's what I'm
honest.
saying. So then you're enabling social injustice, because if you're not bothered because it doesn't affect you, when something affects you, don't expect the rest of us to ever be there trying to fight for your rights, or defending you in any way.
I feel like that attitude is what is making some of the activists pull back.
Mhm.
Like an activist is fighting for social justice, and they're fighting for human rights to be kept. But then you start finding people trying to relate them to religious issues, because religious issues and human rights go hand in hand. Because sometimes the word is sometimes. I
Yeah.
saw your eyes. Sometimes go hand in hand. So people want you to become a fighter for their cause rather than your own personal cause. It is important to remember that you can fight when you focus, when you specialize in something, you can do the most good within that field. But if you're just there tapakai throwing your seeds everywhere, some might not even grow, you know. I feel like if you focus
The
on
thing
one
is,
thing,
it
it's
doesn't have to. It
important.
doesn't have to grow. No one is saying it has to grow.
No, but there's no way you're going to
Just a
make an
minute.
influence if it doesn't grow, if it doesn't become something.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you're getting
No,
me.
what I'm saying
My
is
point is,
it doesn't have to grow, but you need to, you can say something about it, you can be bothered about it.
mhm,
Like if you're totally unaffected just because that's not your niche, you're part of the problem. You're definitely part of the problem.
you don't have to
You
do
you
something
don't
about
have
it.
to speak about everything, you don't have to talk about everything, but you can't say nothing else apart from what affects me.
Yeah, you can't say
That's
that.
a problem.
But people should not. My point is, people should not call you out when you can't do something. When
Mm.
something is not personal to you. I feel like people should not call you out for
I,
not. Yeah, if you like, for instance, if you're a hijabi person,
what do you
and
mean? A Muslim? What's a hijabi
not
person?
all hijabi people are Muslims. Not
They're
all
what?
people
They're
who
what?
cover their heads are Muslims.
They're what?
They have different religions. Have you met the world? Some of them are not even for religious purposes. Point is,
Mm.
if you cover your head for whatever reason, just because there's an issue that is related, I don't know how to say this. I feel like one of the biggest things that puts down our activists is disunity and fragmentation. Like people don't want to back you up because they feel like you're not doing enough for some other cause. While in real sense, it is not a cause that is personal to you, and or you don't have enough information to speak about it, right?
But that's what I'm saying. If you don't have enough information, then that's for that particular cause. You see, but you can't neglect, or you can't neglect all the others because they're not your niche. You don't have
You're,
to
you're not
speak.
you're
No,
not
you don't have to
neglecting
speak
them.
about
They're just
all of
not
them,
personal
but you
to
can't.
you enough for you to
So
speak
you, so
about it.
so only one thing is personal to you. So
Not
you should
one thing
only
is
speak
personal
about
to
one
you. Speak
personal
about
thing.
everything that is personal to you. But when it's not, it's not.
No, then Boniface wouldn't have been fighting for people's rights. Neither would have been Bobby Wine.
This is the
Neither would have
thing.
been Stella
Boniface
Nyanzi.
wants to
Or
fight for these things, okay? There are
Mm.
things that do not come personal to him. Like, for instance, if
That's what
Boniface,
I'm saying. It doesn't have to affect you personally for you to be bothered by it.
okay, it's not affecting necessarily, it's just personal to you. Like, you understand it, and it's a cause you can fight for. Where? A cause you can fight for. My biggest problem with the world is they keep telling people how to behave, telling activists what and what to fight for. Yes, I want to fight for the whole world and I want unity. But some things I disagree with, number one. Some other things I don't have information about it. When that happens, it is imperative for us to recognize that they're still people, they're human beings. They have things that are personal to them and other things that are not personal to them. If I decide to be an activist right now, I will fight for so many things, right? I will fight for so many things. But there are some things that I might not fight for because maybe I don't have enough information. They're not personal to me. Like it's not a cause I can understand. Like I would
No,
fight,
but
like I would write a poem to
I
fight
think
for the women
I
in
think
like
no, I think you're missing. I
Afghanistan,
think you're
but
missing the
it's not
point.
personal to me. Do you get the point?
No, I think you're missing the point.
I also okay, go.
I feel like you're missing the point because no one is telling you to fight for it, but telling you to be bothered by it. Say something about it. You saying something doesn't mean you see, okay, now I've taken up this whole thing under my wing, I'm fighting for it. No, but you're being part of the people complaining or, bringing forth the issues about this particular thing. You don't have to take it as, okay, I was fighting for this. I have to fight for this. I have to fight for this. Be a part of the solution making process. You're not.
Okay,
You don't have
next
to like,
challenge.
take it. Now this is my problem. I have to fight for it. For me, I think the biggest problem, like I had said, is just the government
Government.
repression that they face.
How about the
But all the
security
same, we
from other
can't
people?
say security from,
Other people.
like
We have
like
like
say when it's
activists getting killed by mobs.
mhm,
We have activists getting killed by people around them.
mhm.
It's not always the government that they are against. They're also against people and their social standards and things like that.
Unfortunately, I don't know anybody who's been killed because they're an activist. Because you see, you can be killed, you can be murdered
Mm-hmm.
by somebody. Okay, of course you're murdered, it's by somebody, but you can be murdered for a completely different reason. But people who want to attach that to the fact that you are an activist. You can be murdered because you're an activist, but you're an activist. Everything is always a reason. But I have no information of anybody who's been murdered because they're an activist.
Mhm.
So an activist might have died somewhere, but not because they were an activist. That's what I'd say. Security in terms of when there's peaceful protests or when protests are organized. I know in the region you always write to the police forces to
Yes,
provide
yes.
security for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. But unfortunately, sometimes the protests are the ones that actually turn out to be violent,
Mhm.
end up destroying people's property, end up attacking people. So there, you cannot expect the government to work for you because police officers are usually under the government. You can't expect them to work for you when you're causing harm to other people and to the society. So that is a factor. I don't think I know of any protests where people were denied security, maybe not maximum, like as much as they wanted. Oh, okay. I do know that have been denied security, but I've never thought of that as being usual because people go on to the protest.
Okay, another.
They go
I
on
think
another.
the problem with protest is the fear of it becoming violent. Or the protesters or other people taking part in the protest with malicious intents.
Mm,
So you find them starting to throw
mm.
stones at the police. The police get triggered and then they start throwing tear gas
No,
back.
rarely it is at the police. It becomes like at the police when they get involved because most of the time you find this police around provide security sometimes to the protesters, sometimes to the citizens, the rest of the citizens. But when anything goes haywire and it becomes a violent situation,
Mhm.
then now it becomes the police against the protesters. It will never be, I've never seen an instance where, or heard of, where it's now
Mhm.
the police against the other non-protesting citizens. So you find that now it's the police
But if you are
against.
in the middle of all of that, Max, you just become a
So that's what I'm
casualty.
saying. So it's I don't think I've ever had or seen of a situation where in South Africa
Have
where it
you
has been that the police, there has been that confrontation, but after something has started, not out of the blue, like you start throwing stones at the police. You find like
have you
something
not
has
been part
happened.
of university strikes?
It's never, that doesn't start. It comes when you see so a lot of when you're having a protest, you need to write to the police. You need to. It's
Okay,
a
so in
recommendation.
the
It's
event
a
that you're in a
recommendation.
university
You need
setting,
to
you write
write.
to the
You
security.
have to,
You inform
and you
them.
have to write to the police. You're going to use the streets. It's the police. You must write to the university and to the police.
If you're going to use the university premises alone, for those who
Okay,
went to universities with
then
big premises,
then that's just that's different for
that's
you
just the
guys.
security. So what in the event that it's still a peaceful protest and then they come and they try to um
Usually, it's what I've seen is they barricade and stop people from going towards a certain direction or outside of a certain location. And sometimes you find it's because it's diplomatic area or it's probably government offices or whatever. But yes. But then you want to go there because those are the people you're targeting to get your information, then violence ensues. That's the one I know.
I have seen them shoot at a completely peaceful protest. I have seen
I'm not
them.
saying it's not possible. It's
It
very
happens.
possible.
Actually, it happens more often than we dare to admit that when you're having a peaceful process, they just see you as a threat.
For me, also, I also know when they're trying to, what's the name for it? When there's a protest and you're trying to stop it.
You're trying to stop the mob, you're trying to divide the mob. I don't know. I'm looking for the
You're
word in
supposed
my
they're
mind as
supposed to
well, and it's not
use rubber
coming.
bullets, and then sometimes they use live bullets. That's the one I also know,
Yeah.
and then end up causing harm.
So even in our
I
schools,
also know someone who was hit
even
by
in the high
a
schools,
canister, tear gas canister, and he didn't make it. He ended up dying on his face, like in the forehead. Like,
that is so sad.
they were
We
very
really need to call out the police when doing that kind of stuff because they do this in high school and also university settings.
high
High
school.
school children.
High
Ay,
school.
you
What kind of
high
strikes are you guys
school.
having?
Imagine something major. It's within the compound. They're just going around with sticks and everything, chanting and chanting. They just call
Why does
the
that? Why is
police
is your high school allowing police? Oh. Though I do know of high schools when I was in high school that during protests
and
had they
strikes.
had they had police officers deployed in the school. I know, but they were boys' schools. So
But you see,
it's
the
not an
police officers,
excuse.
they
It's not an
don't.
excuse, but teachers are like, oh, so many boys and the adolescents, and they are very energetic. We can't fight or against them or stop them. So they deploy an entire lorry of police officers.
Those ones
That
that
I
are
know.
deployed do not come in good faith. They do not come and wait for you to strike. They come
Do
already
you?
with the intention of striking. They strike the minute they land to that school like this. They're already throwing canisters. They're
They
already
don't land
shooting.
before the strike is happening. They land but during.
They land, yes, they land during the strike. But you see,
Mm-hmm.
that is, if it's a peaceful protest, you're not supposed to do all of
I'm
those
blaming the
things.
schools. Why are they bringing police officers in school?
You just said they can't handle them adolescent
Mhm.
boys with
No, I'm saying that's what they say, but I'm asking you. It's your duty, is it not? Why are you bringing police officers? Why were you not able to control that issue they're fighting about?
but before we
Do
call
you know these
us
are kids? They're underage. At, at the point where they've gotten to a they felt like we need to hold a strike for this issue to be heard. Are you trying to tell me it hasn't been going on for long or they haven't communicated before? Kids wouldn't just wake up. Kids, those are kids. I don't care how old they look
they
like they are.
would,
They're kids.
adolescents would wake up one day and decide to strike.
Must be something that has
It's
been
only
happening for
unpopular
a while. I
opinion.
think the school could have been able to handle it before. Maybe I'm speaking about this because when I was in school and ever since I left that very school, there's never been a strike. And it's because that doesn't mean there were never issues. But before it would get to that point where anybody feels like they need to strike, the school should have already found a solution. It's your duty, is it not?
Well, we could break down the issue of activism and how it goes round and round with who's to blame and who's not to blame until tomorrow. But one thing I would like to say as I wind up is whatever
Mm.
you're fighting for, keep fighting for it.
Yeah.
Don't let anybody tell you no, don't fight for it like this, or fight for it like this, or you don't
No,
let the numbers
let
make you
people tell
stop.
you.
Don't.
Let
This is my
people
view.
tell
This
you.
is Angesh's view. Don't let anyone stop you from fighting for what you know. You've read, you've
Mm.
done your research, you've discovered that this is what you want. Yes, whether you're fighting for a religious cause, an environmental cause, the rights of human rights, the rights of the whatever you're
Rights
fighting
of
for,
human rights.
the rights, whatever you're fighting for, do not be discouraged by the lack of resources.
Mhm.
Do not be put down by the government. Put your voice out there. Be heard
Yeah.
and actually make the change you want
I'm
to
just
see.
going to say that social media has done a lot for us in terms of activism. It's easier now. You get to masses
I don't think
in
it's
in
easier.
minutes. It is easier than
I
it
feel
was
like people.
previously.
I feel like at this point, people
You're
are
telling
using
me you
that as
never
a
heard
platform.
of people of how people would need to have protests in like the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s.
I am
It was a
saying
hectic to even get the information out there. But I'm saying social media has made it easy. Sometimes you don't even need to take that issue to the streets. You have to fight for that. You only need social media and your point gets out there. So it's definitely made it easier. Not easy, but easier. It
easier.
can never be easy.
No, but I feel like some
but
people are
easier.
misusing social
But
media.
I'm just going to say it. Everything is misused.
Yeah,
Everything
like some people
everything
are
has its
acting out
good.
as activists on
Everything
social
has
media,
its
but in
good
real
and
life
bad.
they don't even support that cause.
There's people who troll people on social media, so people use social media for
For all
negative
sorts of
issues.
it,
Yeah, but also there's people who use social media for child pornography. Come on. So what I'd like to say is yes, you're fighting for something, it's a right cause, keep doing it. But unlike how Angesh is saying, don't be told, please be told, because there's a lot of people who've tried to hold protests, saying there'll be peaceful protests, but end up having a violent protest where they destroy property. So please be told, please be peaceful. Yes, fight for whatever you want to fight. Don't let small factors, okay, they're big, like lack of resources, stop you. That's true, but also care for yourself and the lives of others, and conduct your
Your business in peace.
in peace.
What are you
Yeah.
fighting for? And if you were to fight for something, what do you fight for? What is the one thing that you definitely stand by and you fight for it?
Sexual and reproductive health.
Okay. Anyana fights for sexual and reproductive health.
That's
Before she starts fighting.
Let's not get into that. But
There are
but
so
if
many.
you knew the number of women and girls struggling, topic for another day.
Yes. Before Anyana gets very heated up with that, there are
passionate,
organizations that
yeah.
you can actually partner with that will help you with your costs. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like no man is an island, and activists should remember that. The problem with disunity in activism is people forget that. You forget
Just
that.
hold on a minute. I want to say a very good job to a lot of activists out there. It's not
Mhm.
easy trying to fight
It's
for
not,
whatever
it's
social change it
not.
is in East Africa. it's definitely
It's
not
not.
easy. Yes, now we can go on. So props to you. Very
Yeah,
good
so
job.
take a minute to partner with organizations that you could meet up with organizations that run petitions round.
Okay.
You could partner with an organization like Speak Up Africa,
Yeah.
and we could publish your report. You could publish your research, and we could call for people to take part in different
Sorry. Yeah.
in different courses, in different conversations, and in different things like that.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to approach people. Don't be afraid to partner. No man is an island. So long as
Yeah.
by the end of the day we tick the box and we say we have actually made the change that we needed to
Yep.
make. Yeah. Don't be silenced.
Yeah, so thank you so much for joining us on episode 2 of season 2 of Speak Up Africa podcast. Remember, follow us across all our social media platforms at Speak Up Africa. K is always constant, so Africa with a K. My name is Anyana Bulungu.
And mine is Wangeshi Karemi.
See you in episode 3.
K is always
Bye.
constant. I love that phrase.